The intensified fighting for the Congolese city of Goma is taking its toll. A United Nations peacekeeper was killed and 3 others wounded on Wednesday in a joint operation with the Congolese army to drive out M23 rebels. The UN forces sprang into action last week with a tough new mandate to protect civilians after the rebels were accused of shelling the city. Government soldiers are among the hundreds wounded in the intensified fighting. The violence is the most serious in months and is the first major test of the UN intervention brigade, whose mandate to launch operations against the rebels is unprecedented. It's a major step up for UN peacekeeping operations in the region, which for years have been criticized for inaction. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has since condemned the killing of the Tanzanian UN peacekeeper and the killing of several others this past week. As this happens, Rwanda on Wednesday blocked a joint US-French proposal to impose UN sanctions on 2 senior commanders in the M23 rebel group in eastern Congo, arguing that the evidence against the men was weak. Let's now get more from CCTV's Jen Kyo. She joins us on the line from Goma. Jen, what's the latest from the front line? Where are you now and what's happening where you are?
Well, Selena, we are in Goma, and I can tell you that there are very tense moments here in Goma. We just had the second explosion in Gisenyi, which is on Rwanda's border with the DRC. Now, this happened in just under an hour ago. The government of Kinshasa, of course, accusing Rwanda of being behind the bombing. Now, earlier in the morning, there was another explosion in the same area. We understand 3 people. There's still no confirmation, but there are reports 3 people were killed. It was at a marketplace. Again, the government of Kinshasa, military officials accusing Rwanda of being behind the bombing, not exactly giving out the motive of this attack by Rwanda. Now, yesterday there were 2 shells that were thrown at Goma's airport, and 1 person was killed during that explosion. So at the moment, I can tell you, Penina, Goma is turning out to be a ghost town. Lots of business closed down. People are just going home, and there's a lot of tension at the moment.
And Jen, we do know a UN peacekeeper has been killed already. Are the UN troops planning to step up their efforts to repel the M23 attacks?
Well, that we do not know, but I can tell you at the moment we do know that Martin Kobler, who is the special representative of the Secretary General and the head of the UN peacekeeping mission here in Goma, is leading a UN delegation to Kigali. We still don't know the details about that mission, but we do know that following that, the death of the peacekeeper yesterday, Martin Kobler said he was outraged, and we certainly expect the UN intervention brigade to step up their efforts. Now, yesterday we had the intervention brigade actually back the government forces, that's the FARDC, for the very first time using helicopter gunships and infantry. But there's still a lot of uncertainty about this role by the UN intervention brigade. Remember, it's a new concept of the UN using this concept from the peacekeeping role to basically becoming a target of the enemy and trying to enforce the law and not basically trying to maintain peace, Penina. But there's a lot of accusation and counter-accusations again about who is leading these attacks here in Goma and on the border with Rwanda.
All right, Jane, thanks very much for those details. That's CCTV's Jane Keo on the line from Goma in eastern DRC. Now, Kenya's Red Cross says at least 41 people were killed after an early morning bus crash. Police said more than 24 others were injured after the bus driver lost control and the large touring bus plunged into a valley Thursday. According to the police, the bus veered off the road before rolling over several times. Photos from the scene showed the bus upright but with its roof sheared off. The accident occurred 140 kilometers west of Nairobi. Deadly road accidents are common in Kenya, where highways lack safety features like guardrails or reflective paint. To Egypt now, and security forces are continuing to round up suspected sympathizers of ousted President Mohamed Morsi. At least 60 more people have been arrested in recent days. CCTV's Adel Mahri has more.
Those arrested include relatives of top leaders of Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood. Among them, the son of the jailed deputy leader Khairat al-Shater and the son of Mohammed al-Biltagi, one of the few senior leaders still at large. Al-Biltagi's teenage daughter died when security forces stormed pro-Morsi camps earlier this month. He accused the armed forces of manipulating facts to detain Muslim Brotherhood members. On the other hand, on Wednesday night, security forces also stormed the Cairo offices of the political wing of the Brotherhood, the Freedom and Justice Party. They engaged with snipers in Giza, firing at random on citizens in the streets. At least 5,000 members of the Muslim Brotherhood have been arrested since the crackdown began, stripping most of their leaders and their ability to mobilize masses. But on Friday, the Muslim Brotherhood says they will hold mass rallies that they describe as the grand finale. Adel Mahroui, CCTV, Cairo.
Members of Egypt's April 6th movement took to the streets in the Egyptian capital over the release of former Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak from a Cairo jail. The members of the April 6th movement say Mubarak's release is unacceptable. The group also wants him jailed and those charged unfairly to be released. The former president was released last week from prison on health grounds but remains under house arrest. He still faces charges against complicity of murdering protesters, among other charges.
We
are here today to protest against Mubarak's release. We saw corruption and people martyred. And on those grounds, we demanded for him to be sentenced. And after the January 25th revolution, how can it be that he is released?
We go west of the continent now to Ghana, which awaits the ruling from the Supreme Court on the presidential election petition filed by 3 members of the main opposition New Patriotic Party. In the run-up to the verdict, no courts within the Supreme Court building in the Ghanaian capital will be opened for business on August 29th to enable the 9-member panel that sat on the election petition case to deliver their judgment. The decision formed part of security measures instituted to ensure that security at the court premises and the inside the courtroom was not compromised in any way. Meanwhile, police administration there have warned the public to stay 100 meters radius away from the court premises. According to a senior official, the Ghana Police Service is ready to maintain the peace in Ghana after the Supreme Court verdict in the presidential election dispute. You're watching Africa Live. Let's take our first break this hour coming up. Last immigrants from Ethiopia land in Israel. And China urges restraint over Syria tensions, warn over strike.
I have a dream to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together.
I have a dream, Black civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. proclaimed 50 years ago in a speech that inspired millions of black Americans in white bondage.
Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
King's decree also fired up Africa's liberation movements. This week, Talk Africa pays homage to Martin Luther King Jr. and poses the question, is Africa living the dream?
Welcome back. China says there should be no rush to prejudge the findings of a UN team. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi repeated that China opposed anyone using chemical weapons, but said military action would not help. Meanwhile, the Chinese embassy in Syria has made full preparations to guarantee the safety of the Chinese people in the country. The Chinese ambassador to Syria, Chang Xin, has released details of the planned measures amid the threats of Western military strikes on Syria.
In addition to the embassy staff, there's still 30 Chinese in Syria. These people include the overseas Chinese, students, workers in Chinese-invested firms, and journalists. The embassy is watching current situation closely and keeping in constant contact with the Chinese people in Syria. We have urged them to evacuate as soon as possible. Vehicles and evacuating routes have been prepared. We also keep in touch with nearby embassies. We will do our best to ensure a safe evacuation for the people if any emergency happens.
Well, let's get more now on this. We're joined from Beijing by Wang Xinye, coming to us live, of course, from Beijing. Like I said, Xinye, thanks for joining us. What is China's reaction to the crisis in Syria?
Well, Chinese government made it clear that it is firmly opposed to the use of chemical weapons by any party in Syria. And as the UN investigation team has already arrived in Syria and started to look for evidence of the chemical attack happened on 21st, all sides should avoid making prejudgment on the result of the investigation before the truth is found out. And Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said all parties should remain restrained and calm. But on Wednesday, the Foreign Ministry did post a notice on its website warning Chinese citizens not to go to Syria at the moment and be cautious about traveling to Syria's neighboring countries. And it also reminds Chinese citizens and organizations in Syria to be on guard and keep in touch with the Chinese embassy in Syria. It also suggests them to leave Syria as soon as possible and said the embassy would provide help.
Xinyue, what is the situation of the Chinese citizens remaining in Syria?
Well, the Chinese embassy in Syria says they have no plan on carrying on a large-scale evacuation of Chinese citizens in Syria, as they did in Libya. It says that those who need the embassy's help to leave the country are in actually small number, 10 to 20 people like this. So the embassy will instead notify each of them about the situation in Syria and persuade them to leave as soon as possible. Most of these Chinese people are staying in Damascus, and since the situation of Syria worsened, the embassy had been keeping in touch with every of them. And since Damascus is not far away from the border between Syria and Lebanon, if necessary, those who have obtained Syrian citizenship can immediately leave the country and go to Lebanon, and they don't even need a visa to travel between these two countries. Back to you.
All right, Wang Xinyue there live for us in Beijing. Thanks for joining us. Let's now come to Africa, Ethiopia. Take you back now let's take you to Ethiopia and Israel rather, now where authorities have completed what they say is the final large airlift of Ethiopian immigrants, ending decades of efforts to bring the remnants of an ancient community to the Jewish state. The semi-official Jewish agency says 450 people arrived at Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv on Wednesday. The immigrants are from the Falashmura, a community whose ancestors converted from Judaism to Christianity under duress about 100 years ago, but managed to keep some Jewish customs. The airlift caps a 3-year operation that brought in 7,000 Falashmura. Currently, thousands of Ethiopian Jews live in Israel. Many arrived in secret airlifts in 1984 and 1990. Dozens of relatives of those still in Ethiopia staged a protest at the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem on Wednesday to demand the government bring them to Israel.
We are very happy that today we finished this historical process of bringing the most ancient community of Jews to Israel.
I waited 8 years in Gondar. The wait to immigrate to Israel was very, very difficult. There are people who waited more than 15 years to immigrate.
To Uganda now, when authorities in Kampala are making a fresh attempt to rein in the capital's notorious motorcycle taxis. Known as border boarders, they're the quickest and cheapest way to get through the clogged city. But all too often, journeys from A to B end in hospital. CCTV's Isabel Nakiria has more.
Few would choose to get around the city this way, but more and more Ugandans are forced to.
They're effective when it comes to movement. They'll get you there on time.
For boda rider Stephen Baguma, he says this sort of maneuver is the only way his passenger will get to his destination on time. Baguma is something of a veteran. He's done this for 5 years and supports his family.
I started by riding someone's bike, but now I own one. My children go to school and they look good. I look good too.
Baguma is among more than 200,000 boda riders thought to operate in Kampala. Few motorists are fans.
You drive this way, he's overtaking at the same spot. You stop, he's at your bumper. He knocks you and instead insults you. They do not have discipline.
But boda riders provide a vital service. Like many African cities, Kampala's roads are old and feeling the strain of heavy traffic. Beating traffic jam becomes easy, especially during rush hours, but the risk of accidents associated with the bikes is high, according to police statistics. Kampala's main hospital deals with an average of 20 cases involving boda accidents every day. City authorities want all boda riders to register. Police are also calling for better training.
You are supposed to undergo thorough riding course. After the riding course, you are supposed to come to us as police and we test you. After testing you, then we give you a rider's permit. But most of the bodas don't have rider's permit.
Still, authorities are determined to try. New rules stipulate only one passenger can be carried at a time, and both rider and passenger must wear helmets. They are promising stiff penalties for anyone caught breaking the rules. Isabel Nakiria, CCTV, Kampala.
All right, let's get a snapshot of what's happening in the bees world. Rama is here with the latest.